Welcome to Ink of the Dragon. My name is Edward Lee. This is the first video of many about all things photography. We'll be covering many topics such as camera and lighting theory, color correction and color grading, retouching, composite art, light modifiers, and so much more. I'll even take you on a few photo shoots so you can see behind the scenes how a shoot comes together. So keep checking back on the Ink of the Dragon channel, where we'll be teaching you how to become an amazing photographer and Photoshop and Lightroom expert. Today's topic is about retouching and color grading, which we'll be doing in Lightroom. So let's get started. The photo I'll be working on is a photo I took for an interior designer by the name of Mallory Lajoie. She brought me on to capture a picture for her portfolio. I came up with an idea to blend interior design, fashion, and nature here on the West Coast. Whenever you color a photo, you should have a good idea of the end result before you even get started. Have a mood in mind that you want to convey. Do you want something that is color accurate or stylized? What can help you achieve either state is being constantly aware of the skin tones. Once you start coloring, you will quickly see if you've gone past that threshold of realistic skin tone. For this photo, I wanted a slightly stylized feel to it, specifically vintage and punchy. So let's observe the raw photo and make a few mental notes regarding what needs to be modified to reach our end vision. So this photo was taken early morning and it was quite cold. You can clearly see that in Mallory's skin, which turned a slight purple, almost kind of rosiness to it. So I do want to address those two things and just kind of diminish it a little bit. Now, because Mallory is the main subject in this photo, I really want to bring a lot of attention to her and really make her pop out of the scene and really direct the viewer to scan the photo and really bring focus to her. This is an extremely important concept to any photo. There should always be focus. So let's start with the color temperature of this photo. Now, I did set the white balance correctly in camera when I first shot the photo, and I would encourage all the photographers out there to do the same. The reason being is that by setting the white balance correctly at the source in camera, you can see correctly what the color values are as you take the photo. Sure, you can change the white balance in post-production if you shoot in RAW, but just try it. Try shooting with the white balance set initially off the bat, very intentional, and it can really help the composition when you can properly see how the color values are showing up in your camera. Now, having said that, I am going to bump up the temperature ever so slightly. It's just 5250 right now. Even just 5300 I think will be enough. Just add a little bit of subtle warmth, and this is a key word, is subtlety. I like to work very subtle. The less processing you do, then you can avoid a very unnatural photo. So less processing means a very natural photo, and that's typically what I always like to go for, is a very natural look to the photo. Okay, so if I take a close look at this overall photo, there is a bit of a purplish hue, and especially, like I said before, in our model's skin, because she was quite cold, and there's a bit of a purple hue to it. So I'm just going to dial that back down a bit by moving this tint slider downwards. And you can clearly see that purple has been diminished quite a bit. Now, the exposure of this photo was pretty spot on, and that's another thing I encourage photographers to do, is try to get the photo correct at the source. Don't rely completely on post-production. Try to get it right at the source, because I repeat, too much processing in the end will result in a very unnatural photo. So because the exposure is pretty spot on, I'm just going to bump this exposure slider very, very subtly, just 0.2 here, and that just helps to brighten up the photo ever so slightly. Now I'm just going to take the highlights down just a hair to balance out the photo a little bit, and also take down the shadows a little more And what that's going to do is you'll see is going to produce quite a bit more contrast. It's really taking those shadows a little deeper and darker to really bring focus to our subject. As you can see, it just kind of made her pop a little more. Now with the clarity slider, I'm just going to bump this up a little bit. And what this does, it just boosts the mid-range frequency, if you will, of the photo and adds a little more balance to the overall composition. Now this is a slider that you really want to be careful with because if you really crank it, it can create quite a processed looking photo. So it can really make or break a photo. Now I am going to play around with this tone curve quite a bit, and the adjustments here can really add a lot of drama to your photo. So I'm just going to work with the RGB curve here first and just bump this up ever so slightly. Now what this is doing is you're defining the blackness of the photo, which I've brought up quite a bit. I find by doing this, it brings a bit of a vintage look to the photo. Now I'm going to make an adjustment in the low mid-range here. As you can see, it's bringing quite a bit of contrast back into the photo. There you go, looks nice. And a little bump near the high end here. Now what this is doing is increasing our highlights of our photo, and because I had that earlier dip in the low end here, it's creating quite a bit of contrast in our photo. Now if I turn this, toggle this tone curve on and off, you'll see how that is quite dramatic. It's already has a vintage look to it and quite a bit of punch. It's getting closer to that vintage look, at least, that I'm looking for, that I'm already envisioning. Now let's mess around with the red curve. Now I'm just gonna move the low end, the shadows here, and let's bump that to the right a little bit. Now this is just removing some of the reds from the shadows and introducing some cyan, which I always find is can add a lot of drama to the shadow part of your composition, and also knocks a bit of the reds out of the skin tone because, like I said, Mallory is quite cold, so it just helps reduce some of the redness in the face. And let's actually change the mid-range of the red tone curve. And this is all done by feel. Like, you don't want to be too systematic about it or too rigid about it. There's no set rules when adjusting these sort of things. In fact, I would go as far as saying that all these changes I'm making, all these adjustments, really only works for this photo. So you have to really be aware of the photo, the particular photo you're working on, because adjustments in one part of the tone curve will affect a completely different composition in a completely different way. So what you really want to gather from this video is how to observe a photo, how to make adjustments according to what is actually happening in your photo. So don't just copy and paste my settings onto your photo. It probably will not work. Be aware of what the dominating color is, what the background color, what the background is casting onto your subject. Now I'm just going to eliminate a little bit of the greens in the shadow because there's quite a bit being cast into the shadows from the green leaves. And even by doing that alone, that's actually bringing quite a bit of contrast in the photo. Introducing a little more warmth. Before it was looking a little harsh. So we're going to adjust a little more of the green curve here. And You can see how subtly I'm moving. Like from that center line, these curves are not too far off. So by lowering the green curve in the green channel here, we're actually introducing magenta, which adds quite a bit of warmth and almost a sunset look to the photo. Because if you think of a sunset, as the sun gets lower, it introduces a lot of purples and pinks into the sky. And that's what we're trying to create here or accentuate in this photo. Now let's just add another little dip here. So instead of really cranking one part of this tone curve, you can add 2 points and move each subtly. And it just allows for more surgical precision. Okay, now let's move on to the blue channel here in the tone curve. Now the blue can really bring a lot of drama to a photo. So what I'm going to do is just turn up the blues in the shadows a little bit. Now right away you can see that is quite dramatic. And to contrast that, I'm actually going to turn down the blues in the highlight portion of this tone curve. By doing so, I'm really addressing the skin portion of the composition, which tends to fall in the highlight region. Now if you look closely at the skin tones, obviously it doesn't look very accurate or realistic, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm going for a really stylized look for this. Because it is a fashion interior design look, I wanted something quite dramatic. So by really bringing in the yellows and the highlights, that adds quite a bit of drama to it. So the yellows in the highlights might be a little strong, so I'm just going to introduce another point in the curve here to just subdue that a little bit. Yeah, there you go, that looks good. So let's quickly just turn off this tone curve so you can really see the dramatic changes that these adjustments have made. So this is with it off and then back on. So quite dramatic indeed. These little changes have made quite a dramatic change to the photo, and it's very punchy and it's definitely looking quite vintage, which I think is very appropriate for this photo. These adjustments really bring out the contrast between the purple tights and the blue jacket against this lovely green backdrop we have here. So last but not least, I'm going to adjust the crop ever so slightly for this photo. Now the way I shot this, I pretty much cropped it in camera. I composed the photo exactly how I want it to look in the end result. So any adjustment I do now with the cropping will be super subtle. So let's just go with a 16:10 crop, which will just tighten this image up a little bit. And that should be enough. And like I said, I almost don't even really have to do that because I already had the composition right in camera. So that is something I really encourage photographers to really spend a lot of time with. Sure, lighting is important and posing your model and making everybody feel comfortable on the set. But once you get things rolling and you're looking through that viewfinder, really spend the time and be sensitive to your surroundings. Really compose your photos in camera. You will really thank yourself in the end. It means less post-processing, and what you see is what you get, which allows you to get the photos done faster and out to your client and out to your fans much quicker. So there you have it. There's our living room in the woods. I hope you learned a lot. Please check out our website at www.inkofthedragon.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also you can check me out on Twitter at Ink of the Dragon. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot.